Hey everybody, welcome to Frame Trap. Today I am joined by Mr. Brandon Jones.
Hi.
And Brad Ellis.
Howdy.
Howdy indeed. So we're almost a month and a half in to 2021. How's your year going so far?
Okay, I guess.
Okay.
All things considered, I guess,
Okay.
you know? I can't complain too hard, I guess.
Yeah.
I got it way better than a lot of people out there, so.
That's always a good perspective to have.
It's going well for me. Yeah, I cannot complain. It felt somebody. Ben, you were on the showcase. I think somebody was like, "Well, January went by quick," and I'm like, "I don't know about quick," but it is kind of nutty thinking, especially when you wrap up Goaties, like, and then you're like, "Well, we're already 1 month into the next year as well."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I started thinking about Hitman 3. It's like, should I play it now? Because it was nice going into Goaties having finished Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm like, is that Hitman 3? Should I like get that out of the way?
Right.
So it's not stuck on my list later. Like, what's the rest of the gaming year going to be like? But been playing lots of good games. Happy there.
Yeah. What is the rest of the gaming year going to be like? I feel like it's still so shrouded in mystery.
Oh, yeah.
Which is exciting, but I don't know. I don't know how 2021 is going to be. I haven't quite gotten a handle on it yet, but I'm sure it'll be good. A lot of good things coming out. And a lot of good things have come out, quite a few of which we'll be talking about today. Brad, you just recently finished a review for Little Nightmares 2.
Yeah, a delightful, almost comfy horror series to me, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Cozy dread.
It's very cozy to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's still a horror game, but it's not like, you know, your typical, not a slight whatsoever, but a lot of horror games nowadays are first person or third person because they're very effective.
Right.
And this is just like a weird, almost side-scrolling-esque horror game with lots of platforming and puzzle solving. Like, puzzles are obviously horror games, but I think just what makes this game so fascinating is the world it puts you in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the look
Just
of it.
this depressing world of really fucked up creatures in it, where you're just like grotesque, like huge people crawling on the ceiling, just freakos that I really love.
Right. Yeah, man, as somebody who loved the first game, and I played the demo for 2, and I'm anxious to get my hands on the full game. Cozy is such an interesting way to describe it, Brad, and I think it's due to the simplicity of the game, but it's also like cozy in the way that like the Nightmare Before Christmas aesthetic is cozy. You know, like
Sure,
like,
yeah.
It's creepy, but there's something kind of comforting about it. Like you're like, I'm into this sort of style, and therefore it is comforting to me, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe, I think one thing that's comfy about it is there's, like, nice breaks, I would say, in it.
Yeah, it's not... Well, at least the first one, there are definitely a lot of moments of slowness.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there is, of course, ramped up moments in this, but there's nice brief nice moments of, like, rest, almost the Resident Evil save room. Like, gives me that same feeling of just, like, relief. Like, I know I'm safe for a little bit.
It'd be hilarious if Little Nightmares 2 just... RE save music just started playing for like a second. You're like, wait, was that?
Yeah, you're like, wait, what? Shit, I'd be into it.
Yeah.
That's a good crossover.
Brad, the first game I feel like was really well paced and just the right length. Did you find that to be the case with the second one?
Yes, I did. It is a little longer than the first game, but it's still relatively short. I think my first playthrough was about 6 hours, but it ended at a good time. I didn't feel like in a lot of games, you know, you're like, this is still going, this part, you know, still going here. Like, when is this going to end kind of thing. It never really felt like that. Perfect amount of puzzles, spaced out really nicely where I got, like, you know, puzzle, then encounter, then, like, something else, another puzzle. And, of course, it helps having platforming in there, too, to help break it all up. So, yeah, I was really pleased with the length.
I feel like this is going to be a good candidate for the...
Gameplay one night?
Gameplay to one night, yes. Yeah. Little Nightmares 1, into Little Nightmares 2, do you feel like there were meaningful changes in the sequel, or is it just kind of more of the same?
I mean, it's obviously stuff is familiar. Like, the basic framework is the same, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But they've added some things in there. especially the inclusion of Six with you for a lot of the game, who is
Sure.
the main character from the first game. You kind of doing puzzles with her at the same time, so you're having two characters instead of one.
Do you
Out of it.
do you directly control?
No, you
Okay.
do not control Six whatsoever.
Okay.
But I wrote this in my review, that's always like a red flag in my mind a lot of times in horror games with AI. You're like, oh shit, man, I hope they don't screw up. But the game never really requires too much of them. They just help you with a few things here and there. But most of all, they just kind of serve to me as like this weird fellowship bond in this horrible world of someone you could actually care about and try to protect. Yeah, exactly. Because the character you play in this one's like a little more physical than Six from the first game. Like you can pick stuff up like a hammer and smack guys and stuff like that. So it adds this nice kind of you're looking out for this character almost. This nice element of that.
That's interesting. Like the hammer that you're using, is it the size of the small character or is it much bigger?
It's bigger.
Okay.
It's like a bigger hammer. Yeah.
Okay. Is that pretty easy to wield?
It feels like how it should. Like it's much bigger than you. You could swing it, but you have to be careful. Like if you swing this thing and miss, like it's over. You're dead.
Okay. I guess as a result of that, did you find that there was a lot of trial and error, or did you have a pretty smooth time?
With these,
going through it?
like I'd smack a guy, then a guy would come out I wasn't ready for, or something
Sure.
like that. So I was like, okay, I gotta be ready for these kind of things. But nothing like frustrating. I'm like, oh, this is bullshit or something.
Trying to draw from my memories of the first game, I don't think there were any moments where I was like outright like, oh, like that kind of scared. But there's just a lot of like, oh, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah, Little Nightmares is very much an unsettling game instead of relying on like atmosphere.
Yeah.
Instead of jump scares.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I don't think there's really any. Like, I didn't get scared from anything, but maybe some people would.
Sure.
But yeah.
Did you feel like things progressively got more messed up as the game went on, just aesthetically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, yeah. I mean, it's all kind of messed up, like
Right.
everything, but
Right.
stuff definitely gets like crazier as you get near the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of like eye-opening stuff. It's just that kind of horror where you're like, wait, what? Like, what is that? What am I looking at? Like,
Yeah.
And it's that uncertainty, that fear. Kind of reminds me of like the best parts almost of any horror film on average are like 30 to 50 minutes of that horror film. Like that's when stuff really gets good. When you get past the introductions, when the whatever antagonist or driving evil force is revealed and you still are asking questions, it's when you kind of understand everything, and then the big fight at the end that you're like, I'm over it now. Like I'm just not scared of this thing anymore. And so it's like that building dread is so much is fun. This game reminds me of nightmares I used to have when I was a kid, because a lot of it wasn't about like knives or like bleeding or like attacking. It was about like smothering. Like people were trying to grab me. And I remember like that's what was disturbing about Inside, was just a lot of like tugging and you're like, get away, So it's not the traditional like, oh, you're taking away my health bar kind of like fear that develops in gaming. It's just this like, just
grabbed once,
stay away from me. Like,
Man,
you are so tiny.
It's why I love playing horror games with my wife, and my poor wife like hates horror more than anything, but that's why it makes it so good. Where like, because she hates being chased, and like multiple times we'll be playing a game like Resident Evil or something, and something will jump out, right? And she will. It's like a horror movie scream, and like the scream is just so loud that I get scared, not from what happened on the screen, but just right
from
by
the
me.
scream.
Yeah. From her scream. And it's great. It adds a lot.
I was playing an open world game one time, and Amanda screamed when like a horse showed up. I like called my horse, and the horse just came into frame, and she was like, "Ah!" Are you all right?
Yeah.
Like, were you primed for that or something? But it's that's always a treasure when there's so much more scared than you could possibly be, and you're like, oh, that was great. That was not even a character just said a line of dialogue. That's all that happened, but thanks, I needed that.
I try to explain, like, you're the perfect person to play horror games with, because you get scared every time they want you to get scared. Like everything works on you, and that's why it's so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back to Little Nightmares 2, I can't speak to this game too much, but I always thought the first game deserved a little bit more attention than it got. And there was a lot of people that rallied behind Limbo and Inside, as they should. Those games are great too. But I always thought that like more people would enjoy Little Nightmares if they just checked it out. And I wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I wonder if part of it is because it kind of looks so similar to something like Inside. Maybe it just seems a little less remarkable.
From my experience, like I played the first Little Nightmares last year, like late last year, first time. I didn't even know what the game really was though. When I just heard like you guys talk about before, and I was like, oh, it's like a horror game or something. I didn't even know. Like I saw the cover, I was like, I don't know what the hell this game even is, and I booted it up, and I was like, oh,
yeah, Brett, that's a good point because it is kind of a hard game, I think, to explain in words in like a super succinct bullet point way. Like you're just like, yeah, it has a really distinct sort of like claymation look that's grotesque. And there's puzzles and there's platforming and like I feel like trying to nail this down with words, it's not something where somebody's like, oh, okay, I get it now, I'm in. I think you do have to kind of experience it on your own.
Having a visual really helps getting that across.
Yeah, I think there's a demo up on multiple platforms, so I definitely encourage people to check it out because I think that that's the best way to.
And if you're considering, I would recommend the first game.
Yeah,
first,
absolutely.
You will appreciate this game more.
And something that we always, bang on about is having shorter games, and so grateful for this. Yeah.
It's like it's short, and I think it works well for its length. But I wish it was longer, just because I want to spend more time there.
Yeah, I felt that way about SteamWorld Dig 2, where. Like I was just so in love with that game, and I was like, "Really? Like we're over? Like the game didn't even do anything wrong. I just liked it so much."
I just think with Little Nightmares that those games is because like every chapter is like a different kind of theme and location.
Totally.
Like one of them's like a school in this game, and I'm just like, man, I just want to see where other weird places you'll take me to here.
Yeah. Speaking of going to weird places. I've been exploring the metaverse in Persona 5 Strikers for review, and obviously I'm a big Persona 5 fan. Really enjoyed the original game, gave it 5 stars. I've been extremely surprised with Strikers. As somebody who likes Muso games and likes the spin-offs, I definitely think this is the most adventurous I've seen them be with a Muso game, and I think they have captured the game that they're spinning off from better than the other games that they've done. And there is just so much story. Like it's kind of remarkable. And it has some of the benefit, I think, of something like a Persona 4 Arena, where you take these characters that you already know really well, and you kind of get to see where they are after the fact, right? After that first grand adventure. And I think the other nice thing is like everybody's all together, like right from the beginning. It's not like, oh, it's not just, Joker and Ryuji, and then like you're slowly building up. It's like everybody's there. Yeah, like Haru's there right from the beginning. And so that's nice. But to talk about the actual changes to the battle system, so just like in Persona 5, you are acquiring personas. So you acquire personas by like being out in the field. There are tough personas that when you kill, they'll drop a mask and you pick them up. And then you actually go into the Velvet Room and fuse new personas. And so, just like Persona 5, you're constantly getting new personas, fusing them together. As they level up, they get new abilities. And so like it's constantly changing up. And then when you're actually out in the field, everything you fight has a weakness. So, this thing might be weak to ice, this thing might be weak to fire, and obviously Joker, since he can hold a bunch of personas, he can cover a lot of those bases, but then your teammates also have their own personas, and they can use their own spells and abilities to do damage to monsters.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
so
go for it.
Just from what I've heard, it sounds like Joker would be the best character just because he can have multiple personas and get all those different weaknesses.
Right.
What makes you pick someone else over Joker?
So there's a couple of different things. You'll just naturally have moments where it's like, oh, like I do have a lot of personas, but I don't have this type of spell that I need, and so another party member has this. So there's kind of that. But SP is also a concern. So like regular Persona 5, as you go through a dungeon, you will drain SP, and there are items and skills and things you can get to kind of help address that. But it's like, oh, I've used a bunch of Joker SP. I don't have any left. Like I need to rely on somebody else. But I think the primary reason why you want to rely on your teammates is so there's 4 people that you go into a dungeon. They call them jails in this game.
Oh.
There's 4 people that you go into a jail with, and you can switch between them in the middle of a battle. It's very active switching.
Oh.
And they have what is called a showtime gauge. And so kind of like Persona 5 where you have the baton pass, they call it a baton pass here when you switch. And they're like, okay, because you switched characters, we're going to fill up their showtime gauge, basically their super gauge, even faster. And so there's a reward for switching because it's like, oh, if I switch, I get my super up more, which will allow me to do more damage. And so you're not wrong that Joker is like the best character in terms of versatility, but they do there are different mechanical reasons for mixing it up.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
And also there's just some cool things with some of the characters. Like the new character, for example, uses yo-yos. Or one of the new characters, I guess you should say, uses yo-yos. And she, like, if you time it right when the yo-yos come back, you'll get, like, a buff, which is nice. And so there are just little things like that where, you know, because you're fighting so much, it's kind of nice to just switch it up and get somebody who has different moves, right? Different combos, that sort of thing.
Right, yeah.
And I really like it. And I'm actually extremely invested in the story. I don't think it's as good as Persona 5, but there have been very interesting developments, and like I really can't overstate how much story there is. Like you spend a lot of time just talking, and it's kind of cool. You don't have as much flexibility or as much freedom as you do in like Persona 5 with like what you do in your free time, but you are going to different cities, and there's you know, you'll go around and there's like different shops you can go in, and like at some of the different shops you can buy recipes which you can use to make food, which will give you, you know, different healing or recover SP, and then you do that and you share the food with somebody, or like one of your teammates will have a request for you that's like with a specific problem that they're dealing with. And they just do a really good job of like, if you're somebody, I don't think this game is for people. I don't think you should play this if you're not already invested in Persona 5, but I think if you are and you do have an appreciation for those characters in this world, it does a good job of letting you return to it in a satisfying way, I would say.
Do you think that's a knock against the game? Can you recall any Muso crossover games you've played before that you were like, it doesn't matter if you're a Zelda fan or a Fire Emblem fan, like you'd enjoy this. You don't need any prep.
I don't know. I guess Hyrule Warriors. That's an interesting question, because I think you could probably make cases both for and against, but like even Age of Calamity, I think greatly benefits by you being already familiar with kind of the characters that you're playing as. I think because this is set after Persona 5, like it's especially true in this case. But do I think it is a knock against the game? I don't know. Not really. 'Cause like, I guess, and it'd be interesting, I guess, to hear from the audience. I guess like if you weren't interested, like why would you play this anyway?
Right.
Yeah,
fair.
But that being said, you think about something like Persona 4 Arena, and like that's just a fun fighting game. Like, even if you don't care about the story or know anything about the characters, like, it is just fun to play. And I guess that is somewhat true here as well, but you will definitely get a lot more out of it if you've played Persona 5. But it's a good question, Brandon. I will say, so early on, I was like, holy shit, like, this is so awesome. Because I thought, like, the level design was really interesting. I thought the way that they incorporated mechanics from Persona 5 into this game, it was done really, really well. And there were neat things, like there are sections where you kind of go into this area and all of a sudden it's a 2D platformer and you have to avoid spotlights as you jump around. And there are so many, like, it even has the Persona 5 system where you don't want to get seen by the enemy because you'll raise your alert level in the jail. And if you raise it too high, there are certain treasure chests that you can't open. And so there are specific points in the world that you want to zip to and ambush enemies. And I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And then I'm about 24 hours in now. And as I've gotten further in, the more it's like, okay, they're just kind of doing the same thing over and over with dungeons. Where like things that were kind of interesting before, it's like, oh, you guys like just use that idea. So like an example is like Futaba will go and she'll have to hack into something so you can progress forward. And the first time you do it, it's like, oh, kind of neat, fun. Like I have to like pay attention to this one person and make sure, enemies don't get too close to her. But after you do it 3 or 4 times, you're like, yep, this kind of feels the same. And even though bosses have unique mechanics, I would say, like, once you get proficient in with it, a lot of it boils down to like, okay, this thing is weak to this thing. I summon the persona, I use what it's weak to, I break one of their shields, I break all of their shields, I do an all-out attack. And so there is definitely some repetition for sure, which I suppose you could argue with the main game, but I don't think it's as good here mixing up its levels. Although, just before this podcast, something happened to the story that was pretty wild, and I was like, okay, this is a cool change. This is a meaningful development. I really like that. So the verdict is still out, but if you're somebody that's like, oh man, like Muso games, they just get a little bit too repetitive for me, I would say, like, on some level, this game is definitely guilty of that too.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah. I don't think it's... I don't know, Brad, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it and see if...
Yeah, I want to try it.
Yeah.
Like, I liked Hyrule Warriors, but I definitely got to a point where I was like, okay, dude.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's like, you have really good ideas, like, just mix it up a little bit more. And I think that also is exemplified in the requests that you do as well, where, these are side objectives, and they're worth doing because it's like... You get new weapons, you get bond experience, which this is actually a pretty cool system where you you increase the bond between you and your, fellow phantom thieves. And it's this it levels up, right? And as it gets higher level, you get these points and you have this board that you can put points into. And the decisions that you make there are actually pretty interesting, where like you could do things like give yourself more health and SP and raise the power of physical attacks and magical attacks and all that stuff. But then there are other things where it's like, if you're not investing in them, you won't get access to those things. So like lockpicking is an example where it's like, okay, if I don't invest in lockpicking, I may run into a treasure chest during a dungeon that I just can't open up. And so you have to kind of be thinking about those things as well, and where you're investing your points and how valuable those points are. Or like, you won't be able to cook certain types of food if you don't invest in cooking. And so all those decisions, I think are pretty interesting. Maybe not absolutely amazing, but they give you a little something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I still hit a wall repetitiveness or repetitive in these games, but I think Musa games have just gotten far more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Over time, because they've incorporated systems from the games they're basing them off so well.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like to me, based off this, like, they get Persona 5, they know
Definitely
all this stuff from Persona 5, so
yeah, that
definitely helps me get intrigued.
Yeah, I am really impressed with how well they've carried over a lot of those Persona elements. I think the repetition is also just, again, down to the length as well, right? Like, I'm 24 hours in and I still feel like I have a pretty solid chunk left. And so, yeah, it's a lengthy endeavor for sure. Well, I mean, I'm also somebody that is like, I got to do all the requests.
You're doing everything. Yeah, sure.
Got to do all that stuff. But it's been fun. I think if you are interested in Persona, I feel fairly confident in recommending this. Again, I don't think it's like...
Cool.
Few games are.
Brandon, you've been playing the Immortals Fenyx Rising DLC, and I think you also just want to talk about Immortals because you've enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, it's tough to get into DLC talk about it because I don't want to be spoilery, because it definitely like picks up where the campaign leaves off.
Okay.
But I just adore Immortals so much, and it's an interesting opinion to have about a game where never really came up during GOTYs. It's not something where even the score, which like I love and like really gets into your head, is not something that I think, you know, could potentially win awards. It's just such a satisfying game, and it's interesting to see because I believe there's Odyssey jokes in there. Like, this is the team from Odyssey, and it almost feels like an exhale, like after they had to make this just gargantuan epic and take like all of this, the Greek pantheon so damn seriously, and then they like get to make Immortals, and it's just like, ugh, like let's just make this whole thing stupid, like all of it, you know. It's like just really bad jokes that are like completely aware that they're bad jokes. Like, you have to like reform 4 of these gods and get their essence so they can return to their original form and then help you and give you blessings and guide you along the way. And one like gets turned into a robot and his hands are missing, and you like find one of them and you're like, handy. And I'm just like, oh god. It's like, but like the tone of it is very much like, yeah, we weren't expecting you to laugh with that. It's just you're kind of chuckling at the whole thing. And it is such a smart way, because I saw a lot of people that were turned off because it's like, they're like, oh, it's a Breath of the Wild clone. It's like blatantly, but like it's very smart because you learn a lot about Greek mythology. Like they have a kind of a jokey take on it, but it's based on what happened. Like they'll talk about things. They have a really great dynamic between Perseus, I want to say Perseus, but I think that might be wrong, and Zeus, and
Odysseus.
Prometheus?
No, it's Prometheus. Yeah, it's the guy who was tied to a rock and had birds like eat out his insides every day. And Prometheus. And so he's telling Zeus what's going on, and Zeus is just like, you know, color commentary and making fun of him. And Zeus is just awful, you know, like his kids hate him, like all the gods hate him. And so Prometheus is actually like, this really happened. Like this character is based on this. But then either like Zeus will bring in the comedy, or Fenyx, him or herself, will, you know, bring some attitude on top of that. And so it's like kind of the best of both worlds. Like, you don't really have to know what's going on or take it seriously. But I could see like people who studied it in college being like, that's actually true. You know, like that's like, oh, hey, like that's you like find like Odysseus' ship. You're like, oh, neat. You're like, yeah, you fight him specifically because there are 4 regions where there are like, heroes like Achilles that were transformed by Typhon, the bad guy, and as you get into each area you'll be hunted by their wraiths, and so until you go actually fight Achilles, like this kind of like shadow of Achilles will hunt you down on the map and try to take you out. And it's just, the map is just like a big theme park. Like, it's literally like the way Disney theme parks are built, where there's like a centerpiece. So there's like this giant volcano in the middle that's clearly like the end. It's like, that's the place I got to get inside, you know, and you can go to any of the regions you want to, but obviously the ones like further back are harder. And you see everything. So like the whole time from the very beginning of the game, you can see like Zeus's throne and lightning striking it. And you're like, oh, I can't wait to get up there. And so something like Days Gone, which I really enjoyed, there were parts of that map where I was just like, oh, what's in here? Oh, wow, another 15 hours of this game. Okay. Whereas like the size of Immortals is just staring at you the whole time.
Yeah.
It's a very accessible game. You travel so fast. Like, they took all of the fun traversal elements of Breath of the Wild and just sped everything up. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And it was just I don't know. It was kind of it's kind of like sugary cereal. You know, it's like, this isn't good for me. And like, if we were handing out cereal awards, like, I might not give it to Lucky Charms, but like, I'm gonna eat 3 bowls of this. Like, it's just it was just a very fun game, and especially with just like all the like after Valhalla and just you know, Watch Dogs Legion and just a lot of like kind of bloated heavy system kind of games. It was just neat being like, go get stuff, bring it back to this Hall of Gods, level up, head right back out again, and just go get more stuff.
I checked out the demo on Stadia, just kind of it was one to check out Immortals just for a little bit and to like see how Stadia was, and it ran beautifully for me, and I was really in love with the style of the game, like just how vibrant it was, and I really appreciated kind of the overall aesthetic. And I do feel like this game is definitely suffering from like, oh, it's a Breath of the Wild clone, which is true. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, like, I'm down for more Breath of the Wild. Like, that's a good thing to
it's
take
gonna be
inspiration
a good long while
from.
before we get to. So it's
right. Like
that's
I don't think that's like this inherently terrible thing. And although it doesn't sound like, because you know, Brad has talked about it on Frame Trap before, it doesn't sound like it's blown either of you away. You know, both of you coming on here and being like, yeah, it's a fun game. Definitely has merit to it.
Yeah.
But they were very wise to go with comedy, to be like, okay, if we're going to just like kind of borrow a lot of these ideas that they've added to this game, let's not take much of any of this seriously. And even when it does, it's like kind of cool. Like Hephaestus gets treated terribly by his like brothers and parents, you know, like as a god. And like, I was like going through his dungeon, and when you're like recovering their essence, you'll be in the dungeon and you'll hear voiceover of like their lives and just kind of what they went through. And I was like, wow, sucks to be this guy. You know, like there were parts where I'm like, oh, okay, it's neat to get a little bit of the story, and the performances were really good. But like most of it's just like Ares and is just a complete joke. You know, like a lot of them are just like super goofballs. And one thing that attracted me very early on is it has a really interesting season pass. Like, there's a lot of crazy DLC. Like, some look like themed by like worlds that have nothing to do with Greek mythology. One has like a very like Eastern kind of vibe. Looks almost like Chinese mythology. Lots of dragons and fireworks and stuff. And so I'm curious to get into that stuff later. And so I just saw a lot of people that were like, yeah, I'm not really interested in Immortals, but like, whoa, this DLC is, and it's so tough to quantify that, you know, before you decide to give Ubisoft that much money. You'd be like, like $40 for a bunch of question mark. Who knows how long this stuff is going to be? And going into the DLC, it's called A New God, and it's mostly trial based. So Immortals has what they call vaults that are essentially the shrines from Breath of the Wild. And one thing that Damiani brought up, I almost 100% agree with Damiani's review. A lot of the points that he brought up, you know, I'm totally in line with. And one thing that was a bummer that like a lot of these ideas from Breath of the Wild were really great and were really smart to borrow. But I also get the sense that they were like, oh, we can just have a bunch of these little tiny dungeons. They can all kind of look the same. And we can build them like you would build a level in Disney Infinity, and you just run through and challenge yourself. It's like, yeah, that was a big criticism of Breath of the Wild. It was that like, if I see another blue wall, I'm gonna punch somebody. You know, it's just like, these are fun, and just like Breath of the Wild, like everything's very physical. So there were some puzzles I would finish and look behind me and be like, I'm not even sure that's what I was supposed to do, but it worked. And so it was where it's. The story does kind of make sense going in this direction, and it is gratifying to get more powers. Everything is segmented to this DLC, so you don't really necessarily carry yourself over from the DLC from the campaign, and you can't go back. So it's really just its own like self-contained thing. And they say at the beginning, they're like, I would finish the game because we're just going to spoil the ending for you right now at the first cutscene. So it was a bummer that I'm like, oh, I'm so beefed up now at the end of this. I really want to go back and finish stuff. And the puzzles were fun, but it really is just there is like a ton of lore there. I can't go into any of it again because it's spoilery, but it was just a bunch of puzzles. They were like getting near the end of it. I was like, yeah, all right. I don't know specifically. There's a lot of like, you have like a big wooden block and a big steel block, and the steel block I can throw, but the wooden one I can't. And so if you like carry the wooden one onto this thing and then move it over here and then be very gentle to get it to here, and then I wonder if I can toss it and it smashes. You're just like, oh man. Like, all right, back to the first area, pick it up, move it over. But if you were like in love with Immortals, like I think it took me like 10 hours because I was also like very thorough. I didn't like finish everything, but I definitely wanted to explore a lot of the stuff. And the writing's funny. It's just there's one joke at the end that made me laugh out loud. There's one because they just are absolutely brutal to each other. Like these gods are just always like bickering and making fun of each other. And, so I enjoyed it. Off to a good start. And I think I am definitely into doing something different this time for like the new DLC. But I'm going to be curious to. It's tough to get out of that goatee mindset, but I'm totally into like additional content. Like, all right, that is why another reason why I'm playing this. Not only because it's a good conversation to have on Frame Trap, but I can have that, at the end of the year, like, Immortals, Jones, how was that DLC? I'm like, like, I enjoyed it, but I'm not gonna, gonna debate here. I'm not gonna. It's not something where I would, like demand someone's like, oh, you got to play it. But if someone's just like, wow, I finished Immortals and I'm so hungry for more, it's like, oh, get in there because you'll want to see at least where the story goes.
I do kind of always appreciate the like flat rejections as we approach GOTY, where it's like, I remember asking you guys like, hey, do I need to finish Watchdog Legions for GOTY? And you're like, no, absolutely not. I was like, okay, cool.
Valhalla? Like, nope. Really, any Ubisoft game, like, nope.
Not this year.
They're all very satisfying.
Is there like a roadmap for all the DLC that they have? Like, this is when you can expect it, or just
I don't know if it has dates.
Okay.
It definitely has a like this, then this, then this. Like, and there are screenshots. You can see the style of them, but I don't know specifically when they're coming out. One thing that they do a little bit of in the DLC, but that was prominent in the game that I like really enjoyed, and it took me a while to kind of realize that it was the way the game was built, is you gain abilities that make puzzles like super easy.
Way easier.
So like there are parts where, like, one example is you can summon a clone of yourself, and then that satisfies the like light block qualifier. So if there's like a pad that you're just like, all right, I'm gonna put this on a thing, in a lot of puzzles they're like, here's your little light block, like try not to smash it so you can carry it through this part and put on the lower thing. But then once you get that clone, you're just like, screw that whole part of this puzzle, just moving on. And it's neat because it doesn't like, you don't get a vibe where you're like, oh well, that took the fun out of it. It's like, no, thank you. That's not like, oh, I can just lift these things now. Oh, cool. So if I like missed a dungeon, or if I'm going back in a completionist sense and trying to do earlier parts, it's like, oh, haha, I don't have to do this whole dumb thing over here. I can just run through and finish it. And it's neat to see. It kind of reminds me of like Breath of the Wild, like after 6 months after I'd beaten that game, and I'm like watching videos online of people finishing puzzles, and they're just like, oh, what if I just take this ball and do that? And you're like, oh, I wouldn't have realized. Maybe even the developers didn't realize you could do that. So it's neat to have, and a lot of that's physics based. So it's neat to be like, what? How can I get this ball over this wall? And like, oh, I can do that uppercut thing now. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's fun in that way. You feel powerful.
Sure.
Yeah.
I imagine the answer is no, because maybe the potential audiences for both these games are very, very different. But speaking of things, obviously taking from Breath of the Wild, I also think of Genshin Impact. And I just, that's a game that's completely free that got a lot of buzz and attention. I wonder if there's anyone out there where they're like, Immortals looks maybe kind of interesting, but I'm going to play this game that's totally free. I wonder if that dissuaded anybody. Probably
maybe.
not, but
sure.
Be curious to hear.
Immortals
from people.
Ends, which is nice.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Yeah, it does.
Kind of
right.
Just does not never stop
I feel like
playing.
A lot of people are like, yeah, it's a Breath of the Wild clone. It's not as good, but it's like still really fun.
Right.
Sure.
Like, I don't think it's as good as Breath of the Wild at all, but I still think it's really fun. Like, I have problems with this game, but I had a damn good time just going through this. I was in Jones mode just going through this game. I was just like enjoying it for what it was. Just like, oh yeah, just walking around this world, just having a good time.
Absolutely. It's like with Souls-likes, where I feel like the mindset that I go in with them is not like, oh, I expect this to be as good as any Souls game, but I like that style so much that I'm totally okay with you.
I mean,
Ubisoft.
This is one of my favorite Ubisoft games in a long time.
Sure.
Like, I like this better than Valhalla,
Yeah.
or like a lot of Assassin's Creeds. So it's like, hey man, I hope they make another one.
Yeah.
I saw that sentiment because we were all like, you know, getting near the end, like in September of 2020, we were like looking ahead at Watch Dogs Legion, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and this, and being like, wow, Legion has a really interesting, you know, system that I'm curious to dive into, and Valhalla looks just epic as hell. I just can't wait to see like where that story goes. And like Immortals look neat. And then like at the end of the year, everybody was like, wow, Immortals ended up being my favorite of those three in terms of like something that I really enjoyed. And I think that's kind of like it just automatically takes a lot of the stress off that you feel, just kind of those stakes. Like Legion's really great, but it's just that world is so depressing. You know, it's just so sad. Even in its funniest parts, it's just like,
man, the story in Legion is just so whatever.
It can just be a lot. Yeah, a lot of the villains are just like, you know, they're very silly. And I think one of the my least favorite things about Immortals is the enemies are like super repetitive. They're like, this giant thing is purple now. Okay, now it has crystals on his head. And like, all right, but it moving around in Immortals is so intuitive and so fast. And it was funny going from Tsushima, where I would just like call my horse and be like, yes, horse, and like ride it somewhere, and then like get off the horse very gently and like, you stay here while I go into this village. And then I'm like playing Immortals, and I'm literally like jumping off a cliff and just dropping like Yoshi, you know, just like, my horse, whee, you know, like, like who cares? I'm just summoning this thing. It's not, you know, like I'm just sprinting through this game everywhere, like no matter what I'm doing. It's like I saw some video where some guy was talking about like how he lives in Animal Crossing, and he's just running to he's like running to get his cup of coffee, and then running to get the mail, and then you know, because you're just so used to traveling to that world really quickly. And that was me in Immortals. Times.
Well, it's that part of the show where we are going to shout out some lovely patrons. But before we do that, I want to give one of you two a chance to shout out something that isn't video game related. But the way that I would do it is I would just say somebody normally, but I think I'm going to have you guys earn it this time. We're going to play a little bit of a game, quick game. Whichever one of you can accurately guess right now what is the top seller on Steam.
Venheim or whatever, I want to guess.
I'll give it to you right out of the gate. Valheim is the name of it.
Called.
That's fair.
It's number one right now.
It's number one.
Go Valheim.
Top seller on Steam. Getting a lot of buzz. Ian, Don, and Huber are actually going to be streaming it on Monday.
I saw some of like the house construction. I'm like, that's
my
jam.
It does seem like a Brandonheim. Brandonheim. That was just a slip of the tongue there, but now it's canon.
Yep.
But Brad, I'm gonna give it to you. So yeah, shout out anything that you want, man.
Shout out to heavy music.
Yes.
Heavy metal.
Oh,
heavy hardcore, all that good stuff.
The Ben Pander here. Yeah.
I like thought about this like one CD I remember from like 2001, and I re-listened to it. And I was like, oh damn, this is sick. And I've just been kind of re-listening to it the past couple of days, so it's just been on my mind. I'm just like, man, I miss a lot of heavy music. I've been out of the loop for too long.
Is there any like particular band or CD that you want to shout out?
The band that kind of started this is this band called Darkest Hour.
Okay.
They're still around, but the CD I think is the one I was listening to is from like 2000. So I was just like,
I don't think I know.
Real boomer style, real far back.
I don't think I know Darkest Hour. It's funny, Brad, because like there's obviously like certain music that I'm extremely nostalgic for, and like some of it you revisit and you're like, yeah, this is just as good as it's always been. And then some of it you go back to and you're like, it's not as good.
For sure.
It's not as good as it was when I was younger.
Whatever the trends were at the time and stuff like that. Yeah, and you're just like, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But hell yeah, shout out to heavy music. I love that. This section of the show is brought to you by some wonderful shout out tier patrons. at the end, I'm going to have us give one big shout out. I thought, since I was talking about Persona 5 Strikers today, that it might be fun if you did your shout out in a Persona style. And what I love about that is open to interpretation. Whatever you think that means, I don't know. So think about that as I'm reading off these lovely names. Shout out to Elthanas, Greg TheDarkKnight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, Nick, Stephen Thomason, and Dougie B.
Shout out!
Shout out!
Shout out!
I'll take it. Brad, you've been digging into a game that I've been curious about for a long time, but never really played. Started it once and was completely overwhelmed, and that is Terraria.
Yeah, I'm still overwhelmed in this game. I am a passenger on this wild ride of... I'm playing this game with Kristen right now. She is the guide. She knows what's going on. I'm just there to dig holes and kill stuff right now.
Okay.
But it's been a good time. It's like a very basic way I would describe it is 2D Minecraft with a much larger emphasis on combat. So pretty much from what I remember, the game starts, you're just in this world, you pick your map size and all that. Got to build shelter, baby, right away.
Yeah.
Or you're going to get attacked at night, so you build shelter, and then NPCs start coming. You start building more stuff. You can buy shops. You start building, like, forges and, like, benches. And basically the goal is to work towards certain bosses. Now, there's a whole lot of prerequisites to summon a bunch of the bosses, but, like, one of them was just in a dungeon, this crazy, like, skeleton thing we found in a dungeon. One, we had to, like, get a certain NPC to fight. And there's, like, multiple difficulties, I guess, but, like, we're not even on hard mode yet, because we're just really exploring. But it's, like, you start real basic. You got, like, nothing, man. You start with, like, a wood sword, stuff like that.
Classic
Minecraft. I've seen people
style.
just get, like, crazy, who are, like, flying around. They got, like, crazy-ass wings. I'm like, what the hell's happening? Like, this feels like it feels like Age of Empires or something going up from the civilizations.
Yeah.
And, like, their technology.
It like gets to like almost shmup levels. It almost looks like Gradius at some point.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just like my feet never touch the ground. I'm literally just like
From where you start to where it ends up is like night and day. It's out of control.
Brandon, I didn't realize you had any familiarity with Terraria.
I had it was funny. I shared this on the podcast this week, but my two godsons, I love checking in with them and what games they're playing. And they brought by the iPad and it was like, look at this crazy game. And I'm like, wow, is this some like shooter or something? What is this? You're like a little dragon or something? Like, cool. And then like I talked to their dad and I was like, what is that they're playing? He's like, oh, it's Terraria. I'm like, wait, what? And like went back. I'm like, oh, it totally is. You're just, you have so much armor on. I couldn't even tell. Because the guy with the, with the pickaxe is just very iconic. And just seeing like the green hills, it's like, all right. It's like when you see like Green Zone from Sonic, you're like, all right, I know what that is. Whereas like they were so deep into caves, it's like this looks like R-Type. This is just crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I bounced off real hard just because I played so much Minecraft that when I just kind of dipped my toe in the deep end when I first started to play Terraria, I was like, okay, I don't know if is this really something I want to commit to as much as I should to really get the most out of it. But
I haven't played a lot
playing
of
with
Minecraft.
a partner is I'd never even thought.
You can play with like a bunch of people.
That's great.
Like you can have like your own server and just people
very
hop
cool.
in. You can progress through the game on your own time. Like you don't have to be all in there at the same time.
Brad, forgive me if any of my questions are dumb regarding this game. I'm just
please.
far out of my element with it.
I didn't have like any idea what this game was before I started playing it.
But like when you're taking on, so you said that there's a greater emphasis on combat and there are these bosses. Like, do you spec your character a certain way?
So like there's you don't do that. You like craft specific pieces of gear. Like you can make swords, guns, like you can get magic staffs. And the gear you wear, I guess, determines like what kind of class you are.
Okay.
So there's like there's like a melee one, there's like a wizard, a ranger, and
That's
I
cool.
forgot what the last one is. But yeah, it's kind of like that. There's 4 things to choose from.
As you're doing these bosses, like how difficult are they? Like, what is sort of the progression in the game?
We're just like in the like, think if there's multiple tiers.
Yeah.
We're still in the first tier difficulty, like normal. But like, if you're not careful, you could die pretty fast. So, like, something I never thought of, or I probably wouldn't have thought of for a while, is people like build arenas around boss fights a lot of times. So they're like, okay, we're gonna fight a boss here. So they make like a bunch of planks.
That's awesome.
So they make a little arena. So like, okay, the boss won't get out right here, or we can maneuver
kill
through
box.
this easier. Yeah, exactly, a kill box.
Like, trapping the boss is a really interesting idea, because like, if you don't do that, can they run away?
I don't think they run away, but like, they'll follow you.
Gotcha.
They're out to kill you, man.
Like, because of that, can you initiate a boss fight and then realize that you're like not ready for it and then escape?
I think I've never gotten to the point where that I've either killed it or I've died.
Okay,
right.
Gotcha.
So I'm not quite sure, but you probably can run away a little bit.
What is the punishment for death?
I think you can set that yourself.
Oh, interesting.
So I think
Okay.
I think the default thing is like you just lose all your money, so you'd have to like go back to where your body was to get your money back. But I'm pretty sure you can do like permadeath,
Okay.
stuff like that. I'm not sure if it changes on the harder difficulties either, but that's where it's at for me right now.
Is there like any incentive for bumping up the difficulty in terms of like what you get from bosses?
Yeah. So the whole point of the game, I think, is to fight this boss, like Moon Lord or something like that. But to get to him, you have to go through the harder stages.
Moon Lord is so good.
So you could finish normal. So when we finish normal, we'll go to like a harder stage. Everything will get harder. There'll be new bosses, but we'll get better gear or better loot to make better gear.
Is there any sort of story tying these elements together?
No, not really.
Okay.
Or at least not that I've seen. Like, maybe you could talk to NPCs and stuff a little bit, but nothing too dramatic.
In terms of like building and sort of like customizing your own shelter and that sort of thing, like how intuitive have you found that to be?
Pretty, like, building's pretty easy.
Okay.
You know, like, I haven't really had trouble building something. If I want to build something, I can usually do it pretty easily. But I think what helps with Terraria is there's like a lot of like furniture you can get for your place.
Yeah.
You can get like paintings and put it on walls. So you can kind of decorate it your own style.
Cool. With this being strictly 2D, do you prefer that as opposed to like kind of a more sprawling 3D environment like Minecraft?
I don't know.
Excuse me.
Because I like have barely any experience with Minecraft. I've played maybe 30 minutes of that game in my life, so I don't know.
Okay.
Like, so I can't tell you, but I've been enjoying this for what it is.
Yeah. I'm just kind of a sucker for sprites, and so
Terraria has that going for it. I think it looks really good.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you and Kristen kind of going through this together, and her helping you out. I always love that for anything, right? Like, it's always cool, kind of just like having this teacher. I think it just makes the experience more fun. Do you think you would have bounced off it were it not for Kristen?
Yeah, probably, because I'm always like, oh man, these games don't interest me. I don't care about that. Like, the first like couple hours, I was like, this is okay, but I don't know if I'm gonna really get into it. But as I started playing more and more and more, I started kind of seeing the appeal of this kind of type of game. So, but now I'm like more curious to try games like Minecraft than ever, because I'm very much like, man, I don't want to just walk around this world and do nothing. I need a goal to work towards. But there's they've like introduced that in a lot of these type of games over time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd say like the biggest pull for Minecraft, like the best sell I could give, is that because the world is randomly generated, like in some games, like in a Souls game, you like go into a chasm and you're like, all right, I have no idea what's in here, but I know whatever is in here was designed by a team to make me feel a specific way, or I have to achieve, get a skill to get past it. And when you like open up or just like knock a hole in the floor and you're like, what? And just like drop a torch down or something, you're like, what the hell is in there? You have no idea. And it's like that kind of wonder of just a raw space, like Minecraft delivered in a way like I don't, very few games do, of just being awestruck of just like, oh, well, like that feeling when you're like going through a wall and all of a sudden you hit lava and you're like,
yeah,
like,
exactly,
put a block up, you're like, whew, that was close.
Yeah,
I never thought I'd be into that, but my favorite part of the game has just been something dumb I've just been doing myself. Is I dug a hole straight down from our like hub
Yes.
And I went all the way to hell in the game. Like, the farthest I could possibly... Like, I got an achievement for going to the bottom of the map.
There's a hell?
Yes. There's, like, hell
That's
at the
metal
bottom.
as
There's, like,
fuck.
demons
Let's go.
down there. Yeah, I was like, holy shit. But it's just, like, I made this huge tunnel just straight down with rope and climb down and up.
Yep.
And I was just like, this is dumb, but I had fun doing this. Just figuring out how to, like, build around this stuff, not get killed by water or lava or some weird zombie down there.
You mentioned that you could play with a bunch of people. Do you know how many people you can play with?
I don't know
Okay.
what it is max.
Okay.
I think maybe like you could have like 7 or 6 people, something like that.
The reason that I ask is it's like, oh, this would be like a fun thing to do on a group stream.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. It is totally a group. You could totally do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You
pretty
would
cheap.
you would become the master,
Yeah.
Brad. You would guide us.
Yeah, you would.
Hey.
You'd be our sensei.
Yeah. Not a good sensei.
That's okay. I think
do
it
that?
makes group streams more fun.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Could you take your character into another realm?
I think you can, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Is there crossplay with Terraria? Because I know it's
don't
on
know.
a bunch of stuff.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's on a bunch of platforms, but I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Okay.
It's not going to be on Stadia.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Right. Cool. So you mentioned that you and Krista were going through it. Starting out on normal. Do you think you're invested enough that once you get done with normal, you're going to be interested in going back on a
Yeah,
higher
because
difficulty?
I want to kill this moon lord.
Dude,
or
Moon
whatever,
Lord
so-
is so, just
whatever
I
it
love
is
how
he
shit
is.
that
So
yeah.
like you got to go through those harder difficulties to get to him.
Yeah.
So like, all right, let's go.
Is he calling you out?
Moon
Sending you
Lord-
hate mail or something? Or
I don't know. It's just like it's some dude associated with the moon is a very funny and appealing boss to me.
Yeah. It sounds like a homebrew D&D
Yeah, exactly.
antagonist.
It's like
yeah.
the most like basic thing you could think
I
of.
love
but I'm
it.
so into it.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's what he's called, but it's like something with the moon.
That's what it's called now.
It's just some moon guy, moon boy. I don't know.
I have been busy with Persona 5 Strikers, but for Frame Trap specifically, I was like, I want to dive into that at least a little bit because I want to talk about it on Frame Trap, and that is Bowser's Fury.
I played this today too.
Nice. I'm just gonna call them shines, but they're like cat shines.
cat shines,
Yeah, they're cat
yeah.
shines. I've got 20 of them right now. I don't know how many you have, Brad.
I got like 10.
Okay, all right. So we're not. There's still more to go in Bowser's Fury, but yeah, I'm curious to see what you think. But the general layout of it, it's like exactly what I want out of Mario, where it's like, hey, here's this place. There are a bunch of challenges you could do to get these shines. Just go nuts. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly how I want Mario to be. And, in classic Mario Nintendo style, there are a lot of cute little gimmicks that they come up with for each of the different shines. Like there's one that's kind of cool where like you're going along and like you can only see the ground that you need to walk on to get through this maze to get the shine a little bit at a time, but there are ways around it. Like if you are Fire Mario, you can throw fireballs down and you can reveal more of the path. So that's pretty cool. But there's just a ton of space to explore. And it's nice that unlike 3D World, I feel like you have more control over what you're seeing at any given time. And so it feels more like a Mario 64, I guess, or like a Galaxy or an Odyssey in that sense. And you have Bowser Jr., who's like running around with you, which is pretty cool. And it's neat because in the options, you can decide how much he assists you. So if you do a little, it's like, okay, yeah, he'll go around and like kill enemies at certain points. Or if you select none at all, it's like, okay, he's not going to do anything except for like, if there's this thing on the wall that I need him to paint, he'll get me a power up, which is pretty cool. And there are good, just like general quality of life things that really help with the exploration as well, where you can store a bunch of the power-ups and that's just so nice. Because it's like, oh, here I need to be Cat Mario. Okay, let me hit, up on the D-pad and get a bell. And I feel like specifically the cat power-up is like really, really, really good. And so
it's the most OP.
Yeah.
For sure.
And like there are just so many shines, and I feel like structures that revolve around you having that power, that like anytime I got hit or lost it, I was like, oh no. And so that kind of tension is always nice. But of course, the central gimmick of the whole thing, and I don't say that like gimmick in a bad way here, but kind of the whole idea is Bowser's Fury. And like as you're exploring, you'll see Bowser, like sort of this like black goo tainted Bowser, and he will like rise in the distance. And when he is fully risen, it will make traversal that much more difficult. And so like fire will rain down from the sky. He will shoot his fiery breath at you, and you're going to need to avoid that. And so it's kind of like a Super Mario Brothers 3 like Sun, where it's like, oh, I got to get through this level, but I have this thing that's kind of impeding me. But obviously there's a lot more layers to it than just like an angry sun. But what's cool about it is there are certain parts of the level where it's like, oh, I can only get past this if Bowser breaks it. So if like he breathes on this specifically, then I will unlock, like this special shine that I couldn't otherwise get, which is pretty cool. But Brad, how have you felt about the exploration and, like Bowser coming in and raining on your parade and all that stuff?
Yeah, I was kind of confused at first. I didn't know if Bowser was scripted or if it's like a time thing. I guess I'm still not completely sure how it works. But I did like the idea of Bowser just coming in every now and then, just kind of coming in, trying to kill you for a little bit. And it gets all dark and stormy.
Yeah.
I thought that was sweet. I kind of worry about the idea of like needing Bowser to destroy certain things, but like maybe if I get to somewhere, I don't want to just sit there for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, just waiting for him to show up,
Yeah, I'm not all the way through it, but so far, like I get what you mean, where it's like, oh, okay, like I want to get this, but I need Bowser to be here, because for the most part, at least, it seems, based on my understanding, that it is timing based, where just like after enough time has elapsed, Bowser will come up and, it'll get all stormy and the like. But I feel like I have a good bit of freedom with where I go and what I choose. And like as you get further in, it seems like you have even more choice.
Yeah, you get like that guy you could ride in the water. It's like your boat, essentially.
Yeah, Plessy, I believe, is the name.
Yeah.
And there are shines built around that. And riding Plessy around is pretty fun.
Yeah.
Plus, like, pretty easy to access. Like pretty much anytime you're near water, it's like, oh, Plessy is right there. And the map expands over time as well. And so you'll get more choice that way, where it's like, oh, okay, like I can go back and like clean up the areas, get all the shines in the areas that I've already been doing. Or I can, go on to see new islands and that sort of thing.
I've only done like the first area,
Gotcha.
I guess, essentially, but I've enjoyed it so far. It feels like almost like a Odyssey DLC or something.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, I think it's good. I want to play through the rest of it.
My biggest gripe that I would say... Oh, and I should mention that you can play this with...
another person.
Yeah, and they can be Bowser Jr. for you. I haven't messed around at all with that. But my biggest gripe so far is like... So after you collect a certain amount of shines... you can become basically like Super Saiyan Mario.
Super Saiyan, yeah.
And you have a battle with Bowser, and like you're supposed to get into these confrontations with Bowser, and like the first time you do it, it's like, oh, this is like a pretty fun boss fight. But like now, having done it multiple times, I'm just like, okay, this is kind of getting old. Like, it changes, and you get more layers added to the fights as they progress, but there is still a kind of sameness as you do it multiple times, and you're like, this isn't as exciting as it initially was. Yeah.
The only thing I'm worried about is it being too frequent in between. So I'm like, you fight one, then maybe like 30 minutes later or 45 minutes later, you do the same thing again.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And again, it's not like exactly the same, but it's certainly similar.
There's little changes, but it's like, you think of Mario 64, a lot of those fights are the same, pretty much the same with Bowser, but it's like, you gotta do a lot usually if you're just playing normally to get to that stage.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like, unlike say like a Mario 64 or something, which you get good enough at it and you can go very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But unlike that, this is definitely meant to be a smaller experience, and so I do feel like those encounters naturally, as a result, happen more frequently. But I am having a really good time with it. As kind of its own little thing, I think it's pretty fun. I don't think it's like $60 fun on its own.
No, it's not.
But as a bonus,
it's a cool little bonus that I greatly appreciate. Felt very un-Nintendo like.
Yeah.
I was like, you're putting this in this game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun. It's like, I don't know. I always appreciate, and I feel like on a certain level, am a sucker for 3D platformers where it's like, oh, okay, there's like all these secrets for me to find. And they do that in a bunch of different ways. Of course, there are the shines themselves, but like there are basically like red coins where it's like, oh, if I collect enough of these on each of the islands, like that will be worth its own shine. So not only are you trying to solve puzzles and challenges to get the big shines, but if you get enough of these little coins, they'll reward you. And there are even littler things where like you'll be running around and like, oh, my controller's vibrating here. Oh, if I ground pound this, like I'll get a little reward. And so just like uncovering all that stuff is a ton of fun. Bunch of little challenges. Nintendo is very good at coming up with a bunch of ideas. That's definitely on display here. And so yeah, I've enjoyed my time with it so far. I
think if you like Mario, you'll like this.
Right, exactly. It's like you hate reducing it to that, but at the same time, like I don't know if it's
worth. I don't think it's worth $60 on its own.
No.
But
yeah, I agree.
I think 3D World is a really fun game in itself. So.
Right. Yep, I totally agree.
And you can jump straight to this. It's like in the menu or something.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
You boot up like 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and it's like literally a screen where it's like, do you want this one or this one? Because I haven't messed around with 3D World on the Switch at all yet, but because I wanted to go right into Bowser's Fury, and it was nice that they let me do that. Because I don't think I want to play through all of 3D World again right now, but I do want to check out Bowser's Fury. So that was fun. Brandon, I think you are bringing like one of the most interesting things to Frame Trap that we've had maybe ever, but at least in a good while, and that is Sesame Street. The timestamp for that, this is Sesame Street.
Yes. I feel bad because you want your child to explore the world and find things that they are interested in, but like their entertainment needs to start somewhere. Like you need to they're not gonna like just sit there with a controller going through Apple TV and like they're not gonna find something on their own. And so we were like, oh, Sesame Street is probably like just a safe thing to put on. And one thing that's a bummer is this used to be public television. Everybody used to have access to Sesame Street, and now Sesame Street is behind that HBO paywall. But the bonus is you have like all of Sesame Street, from what I can tell, like just the entire life of Sesame Street. And so it was interesting to go back to like the end of the 70s and start it like from the beginning and be like, man, I'm not even sure I've seen some of these episodes. And I'm bringing Sesame Street to Frame Trap not just because I feel like I have to watch this because of my son, or I've been absorbing so much of it, so I might as well talk about it.
Right.
The show rules. The show is legitimately amazing for several reasons. One thing, just from a raw, children's television, from a quality level, it's I think especially in the 21st century, our culture and media has become much more aware of how to create something that will satisfy multiple people from multiple walks of life. And that's something that we're still trying to get better at, that we're still learning about people who are not necessarily represented as much as others in media. And it's wild to see this show 50 years ago that's like, yeah, do you want multiple ethnicities on a show? We got it. Like, do you want, yes, there's children in wheelchairs. There's children with Down syndrome. There's children speaking other languages. We're just going to throw in, other languages because it's not a big deal, and it's kind of like Mr. Rogers, where you're just like, wow, this man was so light years ahead of his time in terms of like how, not necessarily simple, but like how rewarding it can be to communicate, to a child or create entertainment that can really be appreciated by, by many, many different people simultaneously. And so it's really cool seeing very simple things demonstrated. One of my favorites was just forgot how much I loved Big Bird. I'm so big on the Muppets now, and it's just like going back to the show and being like, oh, it is all of it. And Bert and Ernie are great, and like Grover's great, but it's just like, wow, I was in love with Big Bird. I forgot like how fascinating a puppet that this is. This guy's like one arm up over his head, one hand to the side. And it's not like he's just like, oh, I'm standing on the side here. He's roller skating. He's getting in and out of vehicles. He's opening doors. He's like, there's so many things. So you're just like, yeah, Big Bird's walking around. And then like you kind of get snapped out of it. You're like, wait, that's a person who has very low visibility, is very cramped inside this thing, and is doing the voiceover while he's puppeting I guess. Like how, I had like a debate with Amanda. I'm like, how the hell are they recording him? Is that like, there's no wire coming out of his foot? Is this like, did radio mics sound that good in like the 80s? Like it's crazy.
Well, that's interesting because I know, Amanda obviously does a lot of like acting and voiceover work like on a professional level. Does she have any insight into that process?
I mean, again, a lot of the work that she does is either in our booth or in a booth, in a recording studio. And so again, just like the hoops that these puppeteers had to jump through. It's interesting seeing kind of like the barriers set up in like a way. When I was a kid, I was just like, oh, this is the way Sesame Street looks now. And like watching it now, I'm like, oh, I see what they did like to block that, because they're like, that's where Frank Oz is, like trying to make it work. Or even when they're just, like Big Bird just went to camp. And so it's like, we can't build a forest, so we have to kind of get creative about like, I'm just going to hide here behind this rock. Just put this plant over here, and then I'm just gonna pretend like, or like they take the bus there, and it's like, okay, that's not a real bus. Like the bus they're driving in the action shots, that's like the real bus, but the bus that was sitting on Sesame Street is clearly some wooden thing that they just like can slap together.
Aren't they doing a Muppets Disney Plus show? Isn't that like upcoming?
Muppets is coming to so Sesame Street is on HBO Max. The Muppet Show is coming to Disney Plus in like a week, less than a week.
Okay, we got to get you and Amanda like a role on that show.
The old it's just back. The old classic.
Oh, okay. They're not doing it. They're not doing a new one.
70s or whatever.
There was a show called Muppets Now that was like Muppets in the pandemic. It was like Muppets on like webcams and stuff, and like we saw one episode of it, and we're like, okay. It was not much must watch TV.
I was mistaken then. I thought they were doing a new one. No, I don't know.
I don't believe the world of the Muppets is kind of confusing because they all have like Twitter accounts,
They do?
Yeah. Yeah. You can like follow like Swedish Chef and like
I would follow Swedish Chef. I should do that. Yeah.
And it's one thing that Amanda does do a lot of is improv, and it's another thing I just like forgot about Sesame Street, to where it's like there was like some sketches where they're just like talking about the letter R, and it's like, did they write this? Or did somebody like Jim Henson come on set and just be like, all right, I have this crazy idea, let's just do this, just roll, we'll do it, and you can clearly tell like, oh yeah, they were just winging this. Like some of the Bert and Ernie sketches, they're like, okay, there's a script they're following, this is very Abbott and Costello, like there's a clear setup here. But like other stuff we're just like, these are just two monsters fighting over a pillow. What even am I watching right now? And some super psychedelic animation, like the old I don't know if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's like the classic, like 1 through 12 jam. And I'm like watching it, and you're like going through a pinball machine, and there's all these bright lights. Whoa. And it's like, yeah, this is a good way to get kids like they're learning numbers, but really they're just like,
yeah.
Bright lights.
I don't remember this at all. And it's so frustrating because like I watched Sesame Street as a very young child, and I know like I think I consumed a lot of it, but I was just so young that it's like almost all escaped me. Like I know who the characters are generally and that sort of thing, but like I just don't remember the specifics of it.
I don't really know if I watched a lot of Sesame Street. Watched a lot of Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah, there
Maybe
we
that
go.
was my thing.
But,
Yeah.
but what
go.
you're talking about, I feel like
When we get to Pee-wee's, I'll come back
Yeah.
on Frame Trap and give you an update.
kind of reminds me
Pee-wee's
of like
holds up.
Schoolhouse Rock
Sure.
with the animation.
A lot of the songs kind of have that vibe, that old, the 70s, 80s animation. But just three more things. One thing that is fun was
Take it away.
the actual history of Elmo was that he was a puppet on Sesame Street for a long time, and then just the guy the original creator who did the voice and puppeted Elmo would just do Elmo as like a character on the side, and then they saw him, were like, dude, that's a solid character. We should like give you bits, and then just kids just completely like latched onto him. But Elmo has been there like the whole time, and so it's fun seeing like something where they're talking about letters or numbers, and like a bunch of little crazy monsters comes in, and like there's Elmo, and like he's just some weird guy, the guy who does Scooter is just like doing Elmo in the background, is just grab like, oh no, I'll grab this little red weirdo. And it reminds me, and I knew this before I was rewatching Sesame Street, but when I first met Kermit, it was not in the Muppet Show. It was not in the Muppet Movie. It was on Sesame Street. And so Kermit the entertainer, Kermit the host, Kermit was a reporter. Like, Kermit to me was like, all right, Kermit the Frog, we're on the moon, and let's talk to some of the, like Kermit was like fedora, trench
That's a
coat,
good Kermit
microphone.
voice.
That was Kermit, so it was like when I saw the Muppet Movie, I was like, oh, look at all these, he's got a friend who's a bear. This is cool. Like it was really funny, like going back to like the origins of this character that I'm sure a lot of people, who maybe didn't watch Sesame Street, like that was not their Kermit. There was one bit where like this princess gets kissed by a frog, or something where they do the reverse of the Frog Prince, where like she kisses someone and then it turns into the princess turns into a frog, and then like the prince is like, hey, what the hell? And then Kermit's like, oh, hi. And then he's like, hey, I know this diner around the corner. You want to go get a coffee? And the frog's like, all right. And then they go off. I'm like, Kermit?
Yeah. Whoa.
Kermit getting lucky on Sesame Street. But I think the main reason why I felt comfortable bringing this to Frame Trap was if you have HBO Max, if you got it for like Wonder Woman 1984, and you're like, oh yeah, I got a month left of that.
Boy, that movie.
One thing that is satisfying about the way Sesame Street is set up is the guest star episodes are 10 out of 10, and they're all named that. So if you want to just go find R2-D2 and C-3PO, or James Earl Jones is in one episode.
I do want to see that. Yes,
he hangs out with Mr. Hooper for a little bit. There's an Adora episode with Mr. Rogers where like Big Bird is gonna have a race with Snuffleupagus, and like I forgot that Snuffleupagus like wasn't real. Like he's real now, but like originally was not real for a really long time. So like all the other humans on Sesame Street were like fed up with Snuffleupagus. They were like, okay, Big Bird, yeah, your elephant friend.
Brendan, I hate to break this to you, but none of them are real.
None of them are real. Real in your heart.
Yeah.
But so like Mr. Rogers is just there, and Big Bird's like, hey, can you help me? I'm gonna race my elephant friend. Can you help me like score the race or time it? And Mr. Rogers is like, yeah, sure. And so it's like, but that episode is called Mr. Rogers Visits Sesame Street. So if you want to just go through the episodes and like find one, it's not, you don't have to like dig for that stuff. And so it's fun to see these little cameo episodes every now and then. So like those are legitimately fun if you just want to jump in. And much like it's fun to find old episodes that you've taped of like old movies from the 80s, and then you like revisit some Folgers commercial and you're like, oh right.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun seeing, getting a little dose of Sesame Street, just kind of seeing what the world was like. They had some film shoot at the zoo that, boy, they got a lot of mileage out of. There's just like a little musical break that's like, and here's a monkey. Okay, that was 60 seconds. Anyway, moving on. They're like, and here's a kangaroo. Like,
sick.
Random question, but just you mentioning Mr. Rogers made me think about it. Did either of you see the Mr. Rogers movie that came out not that long ago with Tom Hanks was playing Mr. Rogers?
I've not
yet.
There's a really good documentary about him that I did see. That's called like something like whatever the song is, something in the neighborhood. I can't remember. But
Wonderful Day.
A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I think it's called. Yeah. Which is like as if you didn't have love for that man. Just like, oh my goodness, he was he was very groundbreaking and just completely unafraid to just, deal with. And Sesame Street was as well. Like when Mr. Hooper died, they were just like, Mr. Hooper died. We're not gonna like, he didn't, drive to some farm upstate. We're gonna just tackle that head on,
Yeah,
and like
shit got real.
That was like the
Sesame
Challenger.
Street.
That was like very eye opening. I remember as a kid being like, wait, what do you mean he died? Like, he's not coming back, but we love him and we'll remember him and he'll always be a part of Sesame Street.
You were talking about like Kermit and him being a reporter to you, and that just made me realize like there's so many characters where like depending on who you talk to, the way that they shape them in their mind is probably different depending on their age and stuff. And like, man, like Mario has to be that for so many people. Like, like of course we appreciate it. We have an appreciation for so many different eras of Mario because we've been through it. But like because of who you are, like when you think of Mario, the first thing that comes to your mind probably has to be different. And like I was thinking about Zelda is good for that too, where like when I think about Zelda and like Link, I think my brain probably immediately goes to like Ocarina of Time because that was the very first Zelda I've played. And yeah, I'm just curious like what that is like for you guys, if there's a Mario or Zelda that you kind of like immediately jump to based on past experience.
It's so weird for me because I associate different types or different eras of Zelda and Mario to like a mood a lot of the time. And it just depends how I'm feeling. Like
Sure.
if I'm feeling super nostalgic, I always think of Zelda 1. And specifically like where I was in my life playing Zelda 1 when I was like 2 or whatever, something like that. But yeah, like a lot of times like I think about Breath of the Wild now just because it's the most recent one.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think of somebody like, a kid out there with the Switch, the Breath of the Wild's like their intro to Zelda.
Yeah.
To like, what would they think of some of these older games, especially like if they played Link's Awakening later and they were like, what is this?
Yeah.
And like, well,
Yeah.
this is Zelda. This is kind of what the whole thing's based on. But
Actually,
it's crazy
Link's
for me in
Awakening
the
might have been
80s,
the first Zelda game that I played. Sorry.
like, like when I think about all those characters, like Captain N, that old Mario cartoon, like I didn't really get into the crazy Zelda cartoon. Did you see the Beavis version? Have you seen that?
No.
So somebody tweeted, somebody took Beavis and Butthead voiceover and put it in the Zelda show. And so
That's
it's like,
awesome. I do
so
want
like,
to see this.
It's Zelda's natural voice from the show, but the King of Hyrule is Butthead and Link is Beavis.
Excellent.
And it fits just perfectly because he's very inventive. So there's just a lot of him like getting ready to like ascend, like swing into like Zelda's like tower, and he's like, okay, here we go, this is gonna be cool. It's amazing. It's really good. But and likewise the art from the books, just that classic cartoony take on Link, like that all kind of fits into my vision of it.
Such an old man thing to say, but like kids today are missing out by not getting instruction manuals. Like
I know
so many of them.
Shit.
They it's true that they don't probably give a shit, but some of those men
running straight into the game itself.
Yeah.
It's like you can get information so easily nowadays. Just instantly.
Yeah, but like
tutorials, my ass.
And it's
the
like
art and
you needed them back in the day a lot of times. Yeah, just like seeing character art is just cool.
It's
you just
the
don't
best.
get that anymore.
How else are you gonna know their blood type?
I know,
right?
Their height.
Brandon, how long is a typical episode of Sesame Street? Is it your standard like 20 minutes? 20?
Yeah, it's just 20, 30. And it's like there's like a story. Kinda. There's like a beginning and end, but like we don't.
Dude,
I'll be watching in the morning with Milo, and there'll be some weird cartoon where it's just like, hey, I'm an alligator, and these are my kids, and I'm a king, and I'm gonna hand it down to one of them, and I gave it to this one, and Milo's just like done with his bottle. He's like, all right, I'm done with this. He'll get off the couch. I'm like, all right, we're done, and then like, next day we'll pick up from that point, and he's not like, wait a minute, Big Bird's doing what? And it's like they all just kind of bleed into each other.
Sure.
So
I would love for you, Brandon, to do a super expensive Sesame Street timeline.
Sure.
and take it
Paid for,
extremely.
really dig it.
$30,000
Well,
graphics.
That's another thing too, is they travel a lot. They go to like Hawaii at one point, and
Cool.
they don't, like, it's not faked, like they're in Hawaii, and so they it's neat for them to go on trips. And again, it's just a very worldly show. It's just it's a show in a lot of ways that leads by example, and so it's just nice. I feel comforted knowing that, like, it's not like, as much as I love Pee-wee, I could just see him, like, seeing Jambi and being like, what the hell? I think there's a lot of unusual things, but just not a lot of stuff you got to worry about in terms of, like, does it hold up? Is this, with again, just our society and how everything is changing, so fast in terms of, like, us realizing things we didn't realize before. People having voices, that are much louder than what they had, especially in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
It's really satisfying to go back to Sesame Street and being like, oh, they already had this shit figured out, like, they're good.
Brandon, you talking about Sesame Street is very cozy, but I think it's time to get a little uncozy with this HOTTAKE.
Not as cozy as Little Nightmares, but cozy.
It's cozy to me, damn it.
Hey, I mean, I think in a weird way, Resident Evil's cozy. I think
Yeah,
Silent
it is.
Hill is cozy. Sometimes that's a weird thing to say. That doesn't really make sense. But for this HOTTAKE, I tried not to overlap with the podcast too much if I can help it. And I don't think, kind of poking around on Slack, I don't think you guys really talked about this too much. And so I thought, hey, this is kind of interesting. And this involves Ubisoft in an earnings call saying that they're going to kind of lean into, I guess, free-to-play games a little bit more.
Okay.
I don't think you talked about this on the podcast, right? That you recall? Okay. All right. So to give you some context for this, and I'm taking this from IGN, so credit to IGN for this information. But CFO Frederick Duguet said that their model, is kind of based, I'm paraphrasing here, but their model is based on AAA games, and they're going to stick with that for a while, but they would like to lean more heavily on new premium and free-to-play experiences, and then the AAA premium and free-to-play experiences will all, like, feed on each other through complementary gameplay and business models. And as of right now, mobile makes up about 9% of Ubisoft's total business. But some other interesting things here, kind of like as they're leaning more on free-to-play, they, not that long ago, they just had Hyperscape, which is a free-to-play battle royale that did not meet expectations, which they're in the process of overhauling. But some other interesting things, like CEO Yves Guillemot said that, like, hey, like, things that we already have going, like our back catalog, those things will be an even larger share of our business going forward. A good example of this is Rainbow Six Siege actually gained 15 million new players in the last 12 months, which is pretty impressive.
Man, after all that time.
But
that's awesome.
I just think it is interesting, thinking about Ubisoft. I think a lot of people, of course, think of things like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Rainbow Six and things that have been very well established sort of within their repertoire. And so them talking about, like, hey, we want to focus more on free to play. We want to focus more on sort of like recurring things that will get us money on a recurring basis. That sort of style is interesting to think about the future and kind of speculating, like, what form will that take? What direction do you think Ubisoft is going to go here?
One interesting thing is they're kind of doing that in Immortals a little bit. So there are, like, dailies that you can do. There's a daily quest, a weekly quest, and a monthly quest, I think. And it's funny because, like, Amanda's playing it on Switch right now, and, like, that's, like, her main thing. Like, every day she's like, oh, gotta do my dailies, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a cosmetic thing. Like, if you want to level up, like, don't get stuck on doing those things. But she just loves, like, she loves the open world nature of it and just going out and, like, exploring stuff and not necessarily, like, getting through the story or finishing the dungeons and stuff. And you know, Valhalla was so long, and it wasn't just a question of like, I don't want to play this game anymore. It's like, I don't think it would have sold less had there been, like, Huber and I, when we did the spoiler mode, like, it's funny, he even mentioned, he was like, there could have been 2 less chapters, I think. And when we were going back through, there were exactly 2 chapters we couldn't remember. I like said the title of it, and we were like, what happened in that chapter? And so it was like, literally, it was exactly 2 chapters that were just like superfluous to us. It was like, yeah, it didn't really add anything to the campaign. And so there is a part of me, granted, you know, like I'm a sucker for free to play stuff, but like if that means that they'll maybe sample some fun ideas and have them be more accessible, if there was like a way you could play Immortals and like not get into the story or maybe not do the dungeon stuff, but just kind of run around the world, and you could do that for free. And then if you're thinking, this is really fun, okay, I actually want to get into the game. And then if the game would be, you know, $40 instead of 60 or something, like there could be, they make such interesting worlds. It would be fun, you know, if there was kind of like less of a barrier to entry. Because I think we got that way with MMOs. Like MMOs had like a real strict pricing structure, and then over time they were like, God, we just got to give this game away because we got to get people into it. And so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if it's easier to access, you know, the game and get interested in it before, like Genshin Impact. You know, I think if they did more stuff like that.
Yes, I was thinking, I'm like, I bet they're smelling that Genshin Impact money. They're like, hey, we could do something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things to talk about here, and I think some other information that is valuable is they're working with Tencent to make an Assassin's Creed game for mobile for the Chinese market. And also, speaking of Valhalla, apparently the sales of Valhalla, like, it did extremely well, and it helped Ubisoft have their most profitable quarter ever. And so I wonder if kind of what they're talking about here is like having their cake and eating it too. Cause, you know, you mentioned Immortals, Brandon, and sort of like the dailies and that sort of thing. But also, like, in Assassin's Creed, they already have microtransactions. It feels like in everything they do, they have some form of microtransactions. And so, like, they can keep doing that and then, like, further integrate maybe like mobile games that they're developing, and it's like, hey, like, if you do a certain amount in this mobile game, we'll give you, like, I don't know, bonus experience or like a piece of armor or an extra quest or something in Assassin's Creed, which is not something I would be excited about.
Yeah, I mean, they already kind of do that with like their Uplay points or whatever,
right.
You know?
Right.
It carries over to that store. It's like, oh, you got Uplay points you can use to spend in game. Get this armor set or something.
You mentioned Uplay and like them having their own system for that. And then there's also like Twitch integration with certain things.
Yep.
And it just like, maybe this is an outdated mentality, I suppose. Cause like, if it works, it works, I guess. But like at a certain point, it's like, how many things do I need to be aware of to enjoy your game? It's like, okay.
I think it's super annoying, dude. It's like Assassin's Creed, there's so much, like, it feels like outside of the game or outside of the main scenario that there is to the game. Like, there's all those microtransactions you could buy, like, a lot of them. And there's, like you said, the Twitch thing, and there's the Uplay thing. It's just like, man, just let me, like, play the game, dude. And, like, you don't have to do that stuff, obviously, but it's there, man. And it's kind of annoying.
Right, yeah. And again, like, you talk about it, like, being optional, and you're right that is true, but it is annoying. And, like, I wonder if it's only going to get worse, I guess, especially if they're talking about, like,
it hasn't gotten better.
Their focus changing. But, like, Hyperscape is an interesting example because it just feels like no one cared about Hyperscape, right? Like,
right. Yep.
And so I wonder if with these new initiatives, right, and Hyperscape being a free-to-play game, if the lesson that they take from that is, like, not developing necessarily new IP, but focusing on things that are already successful and you know, taking AAA things and experimenting with new business models for those things.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's that would definitely be a shift, I think, for Ubisoft, because it seems like Ubisoft is always cooking up some new IP. Like it's almost like every year there's at least one. You know, it's like Steep or Immortals, or now Steep is now Riders Republic.
I
Like
forgot
they zigged and zagged.
Steep was a thing.
You know, and like even like we're already on Watch Dogs 3, but like Watch Dogs was a crazy new thing when it was first introduced.
Yeah.
And so they would be interesting. Yeah, for them to kind of double down on franchises that they're already familiar with. One thing that I appreciate in Immortals is like when they introduce you to those elements in the game, like Fenyx is actively like taken aback. He's like, "Wait, what?" And like Hermes is like, I'll just give you this if you give me money, I'll give you this stuff." And Fenyx is like, "That's gross." You know, like I'm not. No,
well, yeah,
cool.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of the developers would rather not have all that stuff in their game, but
right.
you know,
It's a little self-aware at least.
Is this, when a company like Ubisoft is like, hey, we want to lean more into free to play on a personal level for you as a consumer, just as Brandon Jones and Brad Ellis, does that worry you at all?
I mean, it doesn't sound appealing to me at all. Like, I don't really care about their free to play offerings currently. So,
Brandon, I think you've enjoyed mobile and been more like consistently invested in mobile than a lot of, if not all, the other allies. Like them going more into mobile, is that something where you're like, oh, like I could dig this? I enjoyed Valhalla. If there was like a cool mobile game that tied into future Assassin's Creed, I could be into it.
I think the best case scenario is, and this might be not the way that money worked out, but one fascinating stat that I just saw was that we talked about on the podcast was EA is potentially wrapping up their tenure as the sole proprietor of the Star Wars franchise, and apparently made $3 billion off of their time with Star Wars over all of their various projects, and $1 billion of that was not only from mobile, but specifically Galaxy of Heroes, this game I'm like obsessed with, and Star Wars Squadrons got free DLC, and so I'm like, I wonder if they're like, well, we made our tough money by our whales from Galaxy of Heroes, and so because we got that, let's make our either multiplayer, single player focused shooter fans on console and PC happy with some free extras in this one game. So like hopefully it kind of balances out that like all of these franchises don't have to sell their souls in order to try to make money across the board. They can recognize like, oh, we're going to kind of like with Nintendo, like when Nintendo started to have more of a mobile focus, we were all like, oh no, it's like but you can just kind of download and check out Pocket Camp, and like even just looking at it, you get a couple fun things to throw into New Horizons. So like it didn't really poison the well, I think. Like
that's what I'm
not
worried
ruining
about.
an experience. So as long as they have that clear separation,
but it just worries me, man, because like it's already in there,
right?
It's already in a lot of their games. There, like a few drops of poison in there. Like the whole bottle's not poured in there, but there's like a few like bloop, 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 a few little drops in there, dude.
Yeah, I don't, not to be overly cynical, I guess, but reading this stuff and seeing it with other companies, like you always get this sense that like it's like, okay, this was successful, like let's just copy that and like wring as much out of this as we possibly can, to the point where it's just like overwhelming. And so what I mean from that is like thinking about EA and like seeing how successful like FIFA is and how they monetize that. It's just like you get the sense that it's like, okay, we need more of this. And with Ubisoft specifically, it's like, how can we turn everything into recurring money
payment?
And like I mentioned that like no one really cared about Hyperscape because I haven't played Hyperscape, right? But it clearly wasn't as successful as they wanted it to be. And from an outside perspective, it's just like, yeah, because you're just jumping into an overcrowded genre, like trying to make the same,
literally jumping in.
Yeah, kind of like crazy money. And it just feels like a ripoff. And I think that is the thing that worries me the most is you think about Assassin's Creed, right? And like what made it, I think such a huge hit was it was kind of built on this really cool idea of you know, this sort of like history and modern timeline being merged, and the crazy story that spun out of it, and just like the innovation in parkour and all of that stuff. And I'm not saying Assassin's Creed isn't currently doing cool things, but I just don't want everything that they're doing to feel like this desperate, money-driven race to the bottom. Yeah, like, you know, that's how these suits think. Like, we got to get in on that. We got to get in on it. It's like the reason why that's working is because like it's built on good ideas. Like, you can't just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like it's frustrating because there's some cool ideas you see from them every now and then. Like Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle is like a really weird game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's cool. And it's like, I think about like Child of Light, like a weird 2D RPG that they made a long time ago. It's like they have really cool ideas and small games kind of like that every now and then, but I don't want them to leave that behind. Like, you gotta have your mobile games, your cash cows make the money. I totally get that, but I hope we just don't lose a lot of those other experiences in the process.
Are we ready for some emails?
Yes.
Do you guys want to play a game?
Sure. Jigsaw.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the exact same. I was about to do the Jigsaw voice, Brad. This game comes in from Brandon. So I'm going to have you guys play it since I'm going to be looking at the answers. How many in a franchise? Hello, everyone.
Nice.
We have all those franchises we're a fan of, but do we really know just how many games there are in a single franchise? Well, I'm curious to know if you're aware of how many games are in some of my favorites. So below are 10 of my personal top tier IP, and your goal is to guess the number of games in said franchise. Closest to the correct number wins, and no, you do not have to name them all. I will provide each game in every franchise if you're curious, but this game's goal is only to see how close you can get to the correct number. I'll start you off with a couple of easy ones, and then they'll get progressively harder. All numbers collected from their respective Wikipedia pages. Thanks for taking this game if you do, and stay easy, fellow allies. All right, so the way that we'll do it is I will say a franchise, and then you both will say a number, and of course you can kind of deliberate and say games in the franchise if you want, but whoever gets the closest to the number will win. And it seems like he's not counting DLC here as like its own entry. So just games. So the first one we have here is Borderlands.
Borderlands?
How many Borderlands games are there?
5?
5, yeah. You got Tales, the pre-sequel, and then 1, 2, 3.
Right. Yeah, I would actually count that as correct. Because what's interesting here is he doesn't count Tales from the Borderlands. Just 1, 2, pre-sequel, and 3. But I would agree with you that Tales from the Borderlands also counts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I would put that in the Borderlands franchise.
Yeah.
Take that, Brandon.
Borderlands in the title.
All right. So we'll give Brandon 1, Brad 1 there. You both get a point. All right. Sly Cooper.
Nice.
4?
Yeah. I'm
yeah,
deferring
4.
to you.
4 is correct.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Brandon, I know you just kind of followed Brad's lead there. Should I give you both a point or just Brad a point?
Just give them both a point.
All right. Hey, you know what? Brad said both a point. 2 and 2.
Both points.
So for Sly Cooper, we have Thievius Raccoonus, Band of Thieves, Honor Among Thieves, and Thieves in Time. The Resistance, the first-person shooter franchise. How many Resistance?
5?
Oh, because they're 1, 2, 3, but then I know there was like
there's
a
PSP one
game,
and there's a Vita one.
Vita one.
What
okay.
say you, Brandon?
I'll go 5. Yeah.
Okay, you're both correct. Brad, you are crushing this game. So we have Fall of Man 2 Retribution on PS3. Or I'm sorry, not PS3, PSP 3, and then Burning Skies on Vita.
Right.
All right. Getting a little bit harder. Uncharted.
I guess there's 6 if you count Lost Legacy, I think. 1, 2, 3.
I would say initially
4,
5, but I get Oh,
Golden
yeah,
Abyss and Lost Legacy, right?
So you say 6?
Yeah.
7.
Oh,
I think
shit,
the
which
one
am I
that
missing?
that you're leaving off. There's like that card battling game, Fight for Fortune.
Oh, okay. I
Whoa.
forgot that existed.
But otherwise, yeah, you've got
Totally
it. So
forgot.
Drake's
Wow.
Fortune,
Yeah.
Among Thieves,
Uncharted card game.
Drake's
doing?
Deception, Fight
What are you
for
doing?
Fortune, Golden Abyss, A Thief's End, and Lost Legacy. Yeah, that was kind of a
Yeah,
gotcha.
you can't rule out Gwent when Witcher comes around. We got to remember Gwent.
There's another kind of gotcha here as well, so keep that in mind. So Gears of War.
Okay, so
It's tactics now, plus the 4,
There's tactics, yeah.
5, 6,
8?
7. I'd say 7. But I don't know, 8.
Brad is gonna pull ahead here because
Nice.
there is 8.
Crazy.
Were
1, 2, 3.
4, 5.
Judgment.
Yeah.
5. Tactics. Then Funko Pop one.
You got the Funko Pop
the
one.
Funko.
You think
got
I would
it.
forget that
I
bullshit,
thought-
dude?
Hey,
You think I'd forget that?
I wouldn't think of it.
Oh, that made me laugh
Yeah.
really hard when they announced that.
All right. God of War. Not counting the upcoming Ragnarok because that's not out
Okay.
yet.
I'm sorry, tangent. Isn't it like the end of Blade 2 where he's like, you think I'd forget you, candy ass? Or like, what does
Yeah.
he say? Like, that guy who thinks he got away from Blade and then
Yeah.
like, comes back at the end of the movie. That's Funko Pop.
Yeah.
Brad is like, reaches through the wall, grabs him. Like,
I forgot. Let's see. God of War.
God of War.
7.
I'll go 8. Why not?
Brandon actually
that one
ties
you
it
forgot.
up.
Yeah!
Which one?
Yeah,
Some
okay, so
dumb
this
one that
is
you're forgetting.
I'm gonna have to double check this, because Brandon has down here 1, 2, Chains of Olympus, 3, Ghost of Sparta, Ascension, and God of War 2018. But he also has Betrayal on mobile, which I don't think
is that?
I've ever heard of this. So I'm gonna look this up.
I've never heard of Betrayal either, but I knew
Yeah.
there's got to be
Yeah,
one more.
this is a thing.
Okay.
This is
okay.
actually a thing. Apparently, it got 9 out of 10 on IGN.
What?
All right.
Hey, all
The
right.
series can do no wrong. You know?
Yeah.
When Ascension is like literally the worst game.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a pretty good franchise.
All right, so we're all tied up.
What is this game?
This one's hard. We're getting into hard territory. Doom.
Oh my god. This is gonna be really hard. Let's see. I get fan mods confused now too. Let's see. 1, 2, 3,
I'll say 9.
4, 5, 6, 7, 10.
Brad gets it. Brad pulls ahead once
Oh,
again.
it was close.
Again, I'm just relying on the email here, but we have Doom, Doom 2, Hell on Earth, 64, 3, and then you have Doom RPG, 2 RPG, and Resurrection, all on mobile. Doom VFR,
BFR.
Doom 2016,
Oh, that's
and,
its own thing.
and
okay.
Eternal.
Yeah.
Then the next one, Brad will definitely have an advantage on, and that is Kingdom Hearts.
How many Kingdom Hearts games? Oh my dude, there's okay.
Is 1.5 its own game?
Yeah, I guess we'll just
This is
do
tricky.
did they count just separate games?
Okay.
Just separate
guess.
games, yeah.
I can take a stab at it.
Okay, this is gonna be tough one. Shit, hold on.
8? Say 8.
Brandon says 8.
I think it's 9.
Brad is closer. So according
What
to
am I-
the email,
Wow.
it says 11. So we've
Okay.
got one.
Go list
Can
them
I?
off.
I was surprised Brad by how many I can list.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
potentially.
All right. Let's see.
Well, 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Chain of Memories. Dream Drop Distance. 358 over 2 days. I remember that one. Was that the mobile one?
No, it's
No,
three-
or that was
Remind?
DS.
I
That was DS.
almost said 3DS, but yes, it's DS.
It's like Remind was the one that just
Remind's
came out.
DLC
Is the DLC
for 3.
What's the one that was just on mobile and then they released like a movie
Key.
of
Yes.
it? Key. Okay.
Correct.
Oh, I forgot about 2.8 completely.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're
I guess it's
definitely.
gonna
I
be
think we're
just one
definitely
game.
getting fuzzy here because yeah. So in the email, it's included 11. So 1, Chain of Memories. 2, 358 over 2 days. Birth by Sleep. Recoded. Dream Drop Distance.
Recoded, yeah.
Key. Fragmentary Passage. 3, and then
Oh.
Melody of Memory.
Right.
Counting Fragmentary Passage, like I could kind of see it.
I guess
Yeah.
it's like its own
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's
Very-
short, but
right.
yeah.
Yes. Right. Okay.
Fair.
All right. Ratchet and Clank.
Oh my god, okay.
9.
Oh shit.
Clank had his own game.
Yeah. I'm gonna say 9 too. I think it might be 9.
We're always too short.
You're too short. 13.
Whoa!
So in the email we have listed 1, Going Commando, Up Your Arsenal, Deadlocked, Size Matters, Secret Agent Clank, Tools of Destruction,
Wow.
Quest for Booty, A Crack in Time, All for One, Full Frontal Assault,
Wow.
Into the Nexus, Ratchet and Clank 2016. Soon to be,
I
Rift
forgot about
Apart.
a lot of those.
yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah, those aren't like
Two
obscure titles. It's like, no, I remember each and every
2
one of those.
PSP
yeah.
games, dude. Who do you think
Don't
are
have a
God
lot of
of War?
experience with Ratchet. Yeah.
All right. The last one is by far the most difficult. Final Fantasy.
Oh, I was hoping we'd get this.
Of just Final Fantasy games?
Yeah.
With Final Fantasy in the title?
Yeah.
Well, does like Final Fantasy Legend count?
Well, for this one, there are so many that he did not include all of the entries, but
oh,
so they're not all
Oh.
listed off here. So I just have a number basically.
I'll give a nice round 100. I think it's more. I think it might be like 130 actually. But
holy shit! Yeah, there's so many mobile games, dude. Fuck,
Yeah, I
I'd
think
say
this-
60.
Brad is closer to this email, but I imagine that this could be contentious depending on how you choose to classify it. So the email says 54. And this is including mainline numbered games, sequels, side games, Japan-only releases, and worldwide. So I'd have to like dig into this because I think you could contest that number pretty easily, but Brad was closer.
there are like 7 or 8 Final Fantasy 7 games.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like 50.
Right.
Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like,
Yeah,
Tactics Advanced, 10, 10
There's,
2,
like, yeah.
10 3, 13, 13 2, 13 3. Like 50s? I don't know.
Well, and then you have like you mentioned like 7 games, and then there's like you have the 4
Theater Rhythm 2.
right.
You know, like,
Final Fantasy 4, like the
After
after
years,
years.
yep.
right? Yeah.
And like,
Chocobo's Dungeon. Like,
do you count like the DS version of Final Fantasy IV with 3D graphics and voiceovers? So it's like
Well, then there's
Oh,
the
that's just-
PSP version. Then there's the NES version.
right. It's just like
or
where's your cutoff
SNES version?
for
Yeah.
right?
Like I wouldn't count the Game Boy Advance version of Final Fantasy VI, but like the DS version of 4 is completely its own game. That is its own. That's voice acting and shit. Like that's its. You know,
Completely different art style. Yeah. I mean, the
Regardless,
PSP one's kind of like that too.
fun game and fun to think about.
Yeah.
Regardless
Oh,
of,
yeah.
of accuracy, it's fun.
no.
Next one also pretty enjoyable, coming in from Wesley, and this is fishing in video games.
Oh.
He says, "Greetings, Ben and allies. Put your angling hats on because it's time to talk about fishing. Fishing minigames are among the most prevalent of any type of minigame in video games. Seems like you can't play an RPG these days without being able to haul in a lunker somewhere in the game." I really love how this is written. So here's my question to you. What makes a good fishing minigame? Which games had your favorite fishing mechanic? Do you even like fishing in video games? And how much time do you spend fishing when given the option? Thanks for reading my question if you do, and stay easy, fellow allies.
like the environment around me is number one. If I feel pleasantly relaxed in this area, I always think of Twilight Princess fishing minigame.
My mind immediately goes to Ocarina.
There's like a nice sick waterfall going with like rainbow. Dude, it's just so jolly. So I don't know. I guess I don't fish a ton of games, but some. Like I did a lot in Twilight Princess, like the most. I did a lot in 15. I guess
I was also thinking about 15. I really like it in 15. And I think part of what helps it there is there's like a little bit of story going on with it.
Yeah, there's like that legendary fish to catch and stuff like that.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Far Cry 5 stands out.
Wait, I don't even know there's fishing in that.
Yeah,
you can like that's
collect
funny.
better poles and I don't like necessarily the fishing because it's extremely archaic, literally in Valhalla. But I like that you can just in your like pulse where you can examine the environment. You can physically see them. Like you can look out and be like, oh, whoa, there's a big fish in this lake. I guess I'll try to catch those guys. So I like that. A lot of times when you go underwater in games and you see fish, it's like that's not really the fish you're gonna catch. That's just us making like some little simple geometric thing that will resemble a fish. Whereas like the fish you catch in Valhalla are like there. Like if there's no more fish in the lake, you can't catch anything.
I really don't like it when it's just like a gathering point where it's like, hey, go fishing, and there's no game at all, and it's just like, oh, you got the fish. But at the same time, I don't think it can be like so complicated where your immediate response is like, I don't even want to mess with this. Like, I think it has to be accessible and immediately understood, but there like has to be some sort of game to it. Like you have to put in some effort, I think, to get the fish, to get a nice balance.
Animal Crossing, obviously.
Yeah. I thought of one.
Yeah, Animal Crossing, very good.
I thought of one I played at my friend's house a lot. It's Sega bass fishing on the Dreamcast.
Yeah,
dude.
I think
because
of
that's... there was like the fishing controller, dude.
Yeah, well,
it was like a fishing pole.
Well, a good example of like fishing in games, I think it has to be. It can't be like the game. I think it has to be a smaller part of of another game.
Shout out to World of Warcraft.
Sure.
Because I got the turtle mount that was like a 0.01% chance. And I remember just like only one guy from my guild was on, and I was like, you don't even know, so tell your roommates. I need people to recognize.
I completely forgot about fishing in World of Warcraft, but yeah, just like sitting there watching your skill go up. Yeah. Fun to think about. Ton of things we didn't discuss that I'm sure are obvious, but still fun to think about. Our last email comes in from James, who is talking about open worlds, which I figure is always appropriate with Brandon Jones on the panel. And you're really going to like what this email has to say. All right. James says, hi, Ben and participating allies. I recently finished Red Dead Redemption 2's story, and I've been completely blown away by the astounding details and rich, vibrant open world the game offers its players, as well as the litany of ways that Rockstar has prioritized the value of players' time by continually and relentlessly offering up unforgettable missions and moments. I believe Red Dead Redemption 2 is the measuring stick of open world games now, and I don't see other developers capturing the same essence. Do you think that Ubisoft, CD Projekt Red, Bethesda, and other developers of open world games put more stock into making their games look prettier than they do making their games worthwhile to play and enjoy?
I don't know.
They do their own thing.
Yeah, Red Dead's like just how Rockstar does their open world games, just different compared to like Ubisoft.
Yeah.
There's like a different focus to the world.
I like that there's kind of like this leapfrogging effect with Ubisoft games where like one will come out and then the next Assassin's Creed or the next Watch Dogs or something will be like, good idea, Montreal, let's do this, and like they'll take one idea from it and implement it. And so that's why it's really fascinating to see that like open world Star Wars game. It's like, whoa, is that going to be like The Division, or is it going to be like its own new thing? I wonder. Like there's just a lot of, it's really hard to set expectations for that because there's so many ways that they can take it. Whereas Rockstar is just whatever the hell Rockstar wants to do. And so like, if a lot of times people are like, I don't like Rockstar's design, they should change it. It's like, they will not. Like they are going to make the game that they want to make for sure. Like they're probably more, incentivized now to focus more on online stuff than make like, bigger single player campaigns. But at the same time, something like Elder Scrolls is like, that's going to do its own crazy thing. Like there's a freedom in Skyrim that is, I think, absent from, Red Dead. Like if you just kind of are like, what's in this cave or what's over on this hill in Red Dead, it's like, you might not find anything. Or it's like in a Breath of the Wild or a Skyrim, like you probably will. Like they've set that up in an intentional way that you'll bump into something.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Breath of the Wild because I do think there's a playfulness in Red Dead Redemption 2's world, and there is a lot to do, but it's very, very different than the kind of playfulness that is in Breath of the Wild. And I wouldn't say Breath of the Wild has, quote unquote, the prettiest open world, but I think it, with the mechanics that are in place in that game, it functions very, very well. And like another example is Spider-Man, right? Where like the way that world is designed is for you to get as much enjoyment out of the traversal as possible. And, swinging through buildings and like running up skyscrapers. Like I want to do it right now just because it's so much fun to do. And it feels like it complements that movement super, super well. And so I do think that there are things to take from Red Dead Redemption 2 specifically, but I don't want everything to feel like Red Dead Redemption 2.
I mean, yeah, I don't want them all to feel the same.
I think the vibe I get from Rockstar is that I think like to compare Red Dead Redemption 2 to Spider-Man, I think there was design decisions and efforts made by that team to bring Spider-Man to life the way they wanted to create a game and a world and a combat system and a traversal system that all made sense for that character. Where I feel like Rockstar does things because Rockstar's crazy. Like they add things into the game where I'm like, you didn't need this. What are you doing? This is insane. Like there's so much crazy detail to like how elaborate that one little system is in terms of how many different ways it can take the story and how you can just totally miss that. Like I could talk to somebody who put hours into Red Dead and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I never went to that area. I never met that person. It's just like, wow. So that kind of above and beyond, like I don't see Ubisoft doing that because they're like, we're making 3 open world games at once right now. So like we don't really, we don't have the, there's just no need for us to do. There's no desire. Whereas like, Rockstar's like, and this is our game of the decade, so it's like you expect a little bit more, like the expectations leading up to GTA 6 or like, has any game been, anticipated that much in terms of like, what are they going to do? So like they can't really be interesting or, like take risks, like a lot of that's just got to be like, how many, not only are we going to put the kitchen sink in, like how many kitchen sinks are we going to put in this thing? Right. So it's just a different way to approach it. But that's again why I like Immortals, because it's like, it's so easy breezy. It's just so like, oh, it's just a little side open world game. Nice. It's not like, oh my God, I'm committing to this huge thing.
It's a good point, Brandon. It's a good point. I think that is going to do it for emails. This has been a very easy breezy episode of Frame Trap.
You know what I want to replay that I never finished that just popped in? Sleeping Dogs.
Sleeping Dogs. I really love.
And I'm glad it's not like massive. It's just like I put like 10 hours or so into it. I just never finished it. And I'm like, it's always haunted my open world backlog.
I finished it and really liked it at the time, but it's been forever, since that initial playthrough. I'm curious if it would still hold up for me. But yeah, I really have fond memories of that game. Thank you so much to Brandon Jones and Brad Ellis. If you want to write into Frame Trap, the email address is askeasyallies@gmail.com. One more time, that is askeasyallies@gmail.com. Also in the description of hopefully wherever you're watching this. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time.